Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight we're going to be delving into some unexplainable happenings, so I hope you're ready, because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. My father was very no-nonsense, pragmatic, ghosts don't exist kind of guy. He briefly served in the army back in the mid-70s as a rescue and recovery specialist, or as he put it, simply motorpool. The story he shared with me one night while we were out fishing. He had been in Gettysburg as he was a bit of a history buff and wanted to visit some places before settling down, marrying, and having kids. As he lay there in bed at night, it was 1 a.m. or so, and he was a very heavy sleeper. I witnessed this man legitimately sleep through a thunderstorm that flooded most of our downtown area. I've seen him sleep through a tree crashing down next to our tent on a camping trip, and this man would not budge. Back to my main story. He had been sleeping somewhere in or near Gettysburg and had woken up in the dead middle of the night feeling like he was being watched. As he glanced around the room, nothing really seemed out of the ordinary, until he heard footsteps in the room. He didn't really give us an idea as to what they specifically sounded like, but as he's laying in bed he hears footsteps and then watches as the mattress near his feet compresses as if someone's sitting there. But there's nothing there. No silhouette, no body, just a depression in the mattress. As far as I remember, he was alone during this event. He didn't really freak out or lose his mind or anything like that, but he told me that this particular event made him believe just a little bit more in the unexplainable. When I was 5, me and my identical twin sister both caught scarlet fever. We are from America, but my dad's project had temporarily relocated us to India, and we were not used to the water and food there. We both fell into a coma towards the end of the fever. One day, I woke up, and my mum and aunt were screaming and crying and holding my sister, because she was unresponsive and not breathing. They were doing chest compressions, CPR and the like, but nothing was working. I was desperately trying to get their attention because I was young and didn't understand what was going on. I went back to my room to go back to sleep, but in the corner of my room where my sister's bed was, I saw her laying there breathing fine. I went back out to the living room and realized I was looking at myself in my mum's arms as she tried to revive me. Eventually I saw my eyes flicker open, and then everything went dark. I woke up a few weeks later in the hospital next to my sister and my mum, who ended up catching it because of us. My mum told me I had almost passed, and they were trying to wake me up, but I was unresponsive, so the ambulance took all 3 of us into the ICU. To this day, I'm still unsure how I witnessed my almost death. Since I can remember, my mum saw things that no one else could, and knew things she couldn't ever have known. I'm not sure if I could call her a medium. To my knowledge, she's never actually tried to communicate with the dead. My mum never really liked to talk about it, and whenever I tried to talk about these things, she would quickly change the subject. However, she did tell me the spirits she sees or senses are all around us and are mostly neutral. The few instances of an evil presence she encountered scared her so much, she hoped that none of her children would have the same ability. I'm definitely not as sensitive as my mother. However, I do have a few strange experiences of my own. Today, I would like to share them with you. At the time I was around 15 years old. I live in Poland with my parents and 2 younger siblings in an apartment on the 4th floor. There was this older lady. with some kind of mental disability living in the neighborhood. I never saw her before that day. She probably seldom left the house. That afternoon I was doing my hair in the bathroom when I heard noises coming from the apartment door. Someone was trying to get inside, knocking and pulling on the door handle. My stepdad and my siblings were at home with me, but my mom was out for some reason. I now do not remember. Thinking it may be her though, I opened the door. The moment I did, I saw an old, wrinkled lady with foggy eyes and grey hair try to push past me into the apartment. At that moment, I thought I saw a ghost. I stopped her by blocking the way with my body and asked how I could help her. She was visibly shaken, and her adult diaper was pulled down around her ankles. She began crying and yelling that her son is trying to kill her because she didn't want to give him money for alcohol. She said he grabbed her by the neck and attempted to strangle her. I looked over her shoulder, but I did not see anyone chasing her. As this was a bizarre situation, I really didn't know what to do, so I called out to my stepdad. He walked the old lady back home and told me later she's bipolar or something akin, and that she was probably just confused. I'm not sure what to do about it, as her son was indeed an alcoholic and the situation did not seem too implausible. My mum later told me the lady would sometimes come to our apartment thinking it was her place, as she lived in the neighbouring apartment block also on the 4th floor, but I never saw her again. Fast forward 2 years or so, I'm taking a shower, and suddenly I get this very weird sensation. I remember randomly the foggy-eyed old lady, and I knew that she had passed. As I got out the shower, the strange feeling lingered, and then all the toiletries and cosmetics began falling off the shelves. What was really weird is that some just fell straight down to the ground and some flew in different directions. If someone asked me before this incident what I would do if I saw things moving on their own, I probably would have said I would have noped out of there in a second and never come back. But I was not scared. I started calmly picking up everything and putting it back in place. And as I exited the bathroom, my mum entered the apartment with bags full of groceries. "Mum," I said, following her into the kitchen, "you'll probably think there's something wrong with me, but do you remember the old lady with glaucoma who came over here once yelling that her son was trying to kill her?" "Yeah, I do," she responded while unpacking the bags. "I think she just died," I said. My mum then turned towards me. "I don't think there's anything wrong with you." She paused for a moment, then continued. "There was a fire in the neighborhood as I was coming back from the supermarket. The firefighters were taking out the lady's body from the apartment. She probably fell asleep smoking or something and started the fire. Her son wasn't home." I looked at her with my mouth open without saying a word. Her eyes turned from my face to something behind me and back to me, and then she calmly added, "Don't be scared. She's here." My mum has this big stand thing where we put hand creams and face masks, and it's about an inch away from the counter closet to the toilet. Sometimes when I use the toilet, it falls over on top of me. I have one of those lamps with about 5 heads, and the shades are all different colours in my room for extra light. Sometimes when I'm sleeping, I wake up to a loud bang. I open my eyes and my lamp is lying on the floor. My little brother of 1 has a toy piano, where as long as you just touch the keys it plays. Often I wake up to that piano playing. My siblings are at daycare, and my mum is at work all the time. I wake up and I'm alone. I always turn it off. None of my siblings play with it, and it only happens when I'm alone. I have a white heat lamp for my geckos, but we haven't used one in a few weeks. Every time we screw in a brand new light bulb and turn on the lamp, the bulb will shatter. We've checked 1,000 times that we're using the right bulb wattage for the right heat lamp. We even bought a new lamp and the bulbs will still explode. If anyone has any explanation for this, please tell me. I'm also scared to use the bathroom and scared to fall asleep. I live in Japan, but I am American, so my language skills on both sides aren't too sharp. My spouse is Japanese, and we have one child together and decided to move to Japan. So once I moved to be with them, we waited a few years before we started going house hunting. I didn't want to live in the country, since that's where I lived my entire life and hated it, and also didn't want to live in a big city like Tokyo or Kyoto. We compromised and decided maybe returning to my husband's hometown would be best, so that way my in-laws could be involved with our son. I think everyone was pretty excited with my willingness to be closer to the family. We ended up finding a really amazing realtor who was very patient with my American demands. Wide open floor plan with 3 to 4 LDK, so bedroom, living room, dining room and kitchen. We went to see a couple of places, and in my mind, I'm pre-denying anything where my 5'1" self could jump up and touch the ceiling, or if I could touch both walls with my arms outstretched in a hallway. I know the realtor was exhausted with my demands, but he worked hard and found a brand new development with almost everything I wanted. There were 3 homes he wanted to show us, so we brought our son and my mother-in-law, who helped keep his attention while my husband and I spoke to the realtor. The first home was nice. High ceilings, enough room for our family, but not enough parking. We moved on to the next house just next door. This place wasn't up to my expectations. It was much smaller than the first with an awkward layout. While I looked around with my mother-in-law, we heard what sounded like hammering upstairs. She mentioned that since it was a new development, the contractors may be finishing up and cleaning upstairs. That's when I noticed my son had wandered off. I called out to him and he runs down the stairs screaming for his grandma and pulling her arm with urgency. Before I could tell him to behave, the realtor hears the same hammering sound. My husband asks if the contractors were still here because we wanted to take a look upstairs. He replied telling us no. Everything we were looking at today was basically ready to move in. And that's when my son started saying, "Crow, crow." Confused, we followed the realtor upstairs and found in the main bedroom several crows had been ramming themselves into the windows. They would perch up on the railing of the balcony, fly a short distance, then ram into the window with such force they would fall on the balcony and lay motionless for a moment, before attempting to do it again and cawing loudly. Our realtor uneasily ended this home tour abruptly. As we walked down next door, my mother-in-law mentioned how strange it was that the home we saw before only a few feet away didn't have the problem. I dismissed it that maybe the animals aren't used to the buildings, and Japanese crows are pretty annoying and have real personalities. Someone must have crossed them, right? I didn't like the home anyway. The third home felt so heavy as soon as we entered I tried to ignore it, and enjoyed the dining room just adjacent from the kitchen. It was almost perfect. I could make it work, I knew it. There was even a large backyard for our 2 dogs that the realtor even considered in his search. The living room was a bit small, but again I could make it work. No crows upstairs, confirmed by my mother and son-in-law. I took it upon myself to look out the window of the living room. I really wish I didn't. See, my parents and sister always say we inherited a gift to see things others cannot. Throughout my life, I've been through so much therapy and taken so much medication to make the sounds and visions stop. But there's no such thing. I was in a very good place at that moment in time, and I look out the window and there's a small forest, tall trees and grass. But what was out of place was a large man standing there staring back at me in my direction. He didn't look right. He was charred. His skin was clearly burned, and although he was a good distance, I could see the shrinking crinkle around his neck and shoulders. I couldn't move. I wanted to so badly. That's when I saw his eyes directly. Dark black centers surrounded by white, as if his eyelids were burnt off. I heard my husband calling me, asking me something about my opinion until I guessed he noticed I didn't move or stop staring. I felt him step to my side and he asked if everything was alright. All I could muster, as I kept an eye with the man, was, "Can you see him?" I didn't want to stop looking in case he moved, and everyone thought I was crazy. My husband looked but said, "The forest is nice. We need to make sure the dogs don't wander off in there and get ticks." He didn't see him, only I could. I thought I was good. I thought I got better. My husband asked me, "Do you see anything else or something?" When he grabbed my hand to get my attention, I finally looked away to our realtor. Confused, he looked at me with an awkward smile. I guess I looked too serious and asked him what happened in the area. He said he didn't know and asked me why. I told him I saw a man in the forest, and I didn't include the details. I just wanted to know if anything had happened. I watched him go through his folders and shake his head before telling me he didn't know, but since we were starting to like the home, he would check for us. It was an uneasy ride home. The burnt face of the man stuck in my head as my husband and his mother spoke about the last home's great features. A few hours later, we went to my in-laws' place for dinner. My husband asking me why I was so quiet if I liked the home so much. Sending my son to another room to play, I explained to him and his parents in detail what I saw. Maybe they all thought I was crazy, because his dad was quiet before getting up and going to another room and bringing a map. Pointing to it, he asked us if this was the area. My husband confirmed, and my father-in-law's face was stoic, and he nodded before explaining that there was a reason that area was a new development. The government just released the land because it had passed the allotted time of closure after an accident. He elaborated that when he was younger, he heard of a plane crash happened there, where several people died. The main area where it landed was still closed off and the government owned the place, where bodies and debris were found and cleaned up, and it has slowly been released. My mother-in-law is really superstitious, probably where my husband gets it from, and says we should forget that area. A few moments after dinner, we get a phone call from our realtor, who, apologizing profusely that he didn't know any deaths had occurred in the area, confirmed what my father-in-law said was true. After his many apologies, he promised to do a better job researching his area, and asked if we had known about the area before. My husband replied saying that I am not familiar with anything in the entire city since I'm not from here, so there's no way that I would have known what happened many years ago. Once all the apologizing and promises were done, my husband hung up, and his parents didn't judge me. They only said it's good to know sooner rather than later. They truly believe I have a talent as well, but even if that's true, I don't want to believe it, even if this isn't the only time this has happened. I've always been a bit odd. I remember seeing color shadows of people since I was 5. I've had premonition dreams that come to pass. When I was in my late 20s, I was aligned with those that shared similar experiences. I delved deeper into my native Alaskan beliefs, yearning for more understanding. So a few years ago, an acquaintance/co-worker asked for help at her apartment, smudging as she felt a presence. I agreed, as I'd conducted a few in the past. I arrived at an hour to midnight and was met by my co-worker and another co-worker. The rest of the occupants were not at the residency. The apartment was quaint, the entryway, living area, kitchen, small bath and 2 bedrooms. I began doing my thing, burning sage and chanting. I made my way through the rooms, and as I did I kept hearing the name Lucy. I dismissed it temporarily. Once I finished blessing the apartment, my co-worker and I sat in the living room area. I had this nagging feeling to ask who Lucy is. Mind you, this living area was a TV stand, 2 sofas and a large square-foot rest, and a small door to a closet in one corner. So I ask, "Does the name Lucy mean anything to you? Can you tell me who Lucy was?" The co-worker that lived in the apartment went behind the smaller sofa, and I hadn't noticed there was a walking space behind it. It was at an angle in the front of a window, and she reached down behind the sofa and returned to the square-foot rest in front of me and placed a pink gecko on the footstool, explaining, "This is Lucy." I was shocked, as I hadn't experienced an animal telling me its name before. I'd never met a lizard up until that point. The three of us were a bit awestruck, as I had no knowledge of her pet lizard. Lucy was quite happy to scurry all over me, climb up my neck, and remained nestled in my hair until I left. It was a beautiful moment that has me wonder if other people have had similar things happen to them. I'm a registered nurse and a medical student, so I tend to gear towards a rational and scientific explanation to everything. Despite that, during my nursing career, I've had some truly mind-blowing experiences happen to me when patients have passed or when patients were in altered mental states. To be specific, I felt patients pass prior to their passing. I saw their souls leave, or in some cases linger after the passing. I've had patients describe other patients who've just passed as standing behind me, full physical detail, having never met or seen said patient. One night I was working on the surgical floor, which used to be Peds ward, and all of a sudden a very sober-minded patient says he sees a little girl banging on the window asking to let her out because it's too cold on the other side. It still gives me shivers to this day. One day when I was around 5 or 6 years old, I saw a picture of a girl at my grandpa's house and asked him, why is this girl not coming to play with me anymore? I assumed her to be a family friend's daughter. He turned pale as a ghost and said that I must be confused, and explained to me that this was my late sister, whom I never got to meet as she passed before I was born. When I was 17 to 18 years old, my family rented this beautiful apartment for about 2 to 3 years. I always saw things there, and had this feeling of dread, anxiety, and sadness. One night I went to bed and the lamp on my night table turned on by itself and fell next to me. Long story short, after we moved out, my parents told me that there had been one passing due to suicide, a hanging in my room, and one death due to overdose in the bathroom. I always told my parents there was something wrong with that place, but they just denied it until we finally moved, and I was able to predict tragedy in our family, even though I didn't know whom it would happen to. I mean, a few months before my grandpa's passing, I said I'm worried about him, only that I was worried about the wrong grandpa, as I had two at the time. Same thing happened with my grandma a few years later. Like I knew something bad was about to happen. Some random stuff I was about to predict, like a birth of my daughter a year before I got pregnant with her, my friends having babies before it even happened, and work-related stuff like transfers or cuts, but that's all minor. Now, 2 weeks ago my significant other passed away in his sleep due to a heart attack at the age of 35. To say that I felt like my heart was ripped from my chest is to say nothing. One day we were planning our wedding, and the next day I was preparing his funeral. And this is what gets me. I got no signs or premonitions that this was coming. The only thing I can say is that I was experiencing my own heart having palpitations and episodes when I felt like it skipped a beat. Had it been about a year. But I wonder if I'm just attributing this as something related. After his passing I was going mental, praying, which I never do, and talking to myself, begging him to send me a sign, any sign that he's okay. But I had nothing, no dreams or anything. Then one day, I'm having a breakdown while picking up my teenage sister from her school, and she breaks it to me that she woke up one night at 3 a.m. after having a dream about V. He appeared to her in his favorite basketball shorts. She didn't know those were his favorites, but I did. And there was nothing around him. But he smiled and said, "I am okay," the exact words I used. And he disappeared, and then she awoke. I have to note that nothing ever affects my sister. She is in her own world, and you can have a nuke drop next to her and she wouldn't flinch in her sleep. She said she felt very energetic after her dream and didn't go back to sleep. I had his Breitling watch, and when I went to retrieve it, I noted that, because it wasn't moved in a while, that the time stopped at 3 a.m. sharp. Perhaps this was a coincidence, but if you add up the amount of minutes and seconds and hours that a watch has to click through, it's incredibly unlikely. Thereafter, many weird, strange things happened. Like YouTube kept coming up with suggestions of songs with ghosts in their name. Much more stuff happened, but I attributed it to going mental and seeking out the signs. A few days ago, me and my sister were in the kitchen. My daughter was just upstairs but very close to us, with no one else in the house. Me and my sister were talking about my significant other, when all of a sudden we both hear my daughter call my name. I go to check on her and she's genuinely confused. She's 8, playing on her iPad, and she never called my name. I got so mad at her thinking she was just joking with me, but her confusion and fear were genuine. My sister and I both heard it and were very shaken by it. To clarify, the voice was unmistakably that of my daughter. Yesterday I was on our Reddit Paranormal, and out of the blue, the text on the page started to shake. I don't know how else to describe it. Right after I came across the post of a medium who was replying to another Redditor, but it felt like that message was for me. I read the original post and my mind was blown. So many details down to the initial of her friend passing away. It was identical. I replied on the post, and that seemed to be too much of a coincidence. I want to believe that my significant other is trying to communicate with me, and I want to believe that he can see or hear me, but it frustrates me I'm not getting anything tangible from him. Anything like a dream or a vision, something that I couldn't just explain away. I'm confused as to why I can't pick up as much from him as I could with others. At the same time, I feel like he's just trying to relay a message to me. Perhaps I'm going mental with grief while holding onto any thread, but your insight in this situation is truly appreciated. My home is next to a friend's, who I grew up with. His parents live across the road from him, a caddy corner to me. There's a field in between my friend's house and mine. I'm telling you all of this because location and home placement become relevant soon. So my neighbor's oldest daughter started messing with a Ouija board. I don't know if that is what started all this, as we had incidents in the past, but all of this particular phenomenon that I'm talking about here happened after. I tried to tell her that she didn't need to mess with it, and that she didn't understand the extent of things she was attempting to contact. But she's 14, and did not listen. I know people play with them, but I personally believe that they can let things in that you don't want. A few weeks after this, my neighbor's stepson saw a light shining in his bedroom window. He went outside to investigate, and found nothing. The light began to make appearance in all 3 of the houses I mentioned, my neighbor's, his parents across the road, and mine. My mum, I'm grown but have to live with her because of a seizure disorder that I have and can't control, says one night, "I see a light." She said it looked like a flashlight through her window, but shining on the ceiling. I went out to investigate, quite pissed off because I thought someone was messing with my mum. I couldn't find anyone, so I called the cops. Keep in mind at this point, it has been going on for a week to all 3 houses. The deputy shows up and takes me around with him, investigating, then makes a very interesting point. There was dew on the grass even though it was night, and my footprints were the only ones visible. Interesting and strange, I thought. While my neighbor's mum started seeing this light every night in her bedroom. She sleeps on one end of the house and her husband on the other, because he has to get up early for work. So every time she looks out the window, there's nothing to be seen. She also starts to see what looks similar to laser pointers doing the same. It shines through the window onto the ceiling, and it apparently was not exactly like a laser pointer but quite similar. Now here's where things start to get strange. My neighbor was in his garage and saw the laser pointer on the wall. This was at night, and he was out in his garage smoking a cigarette. He steps outside and sees nothing, walks back into his garage, and it's on the back of his wall. Then, he said that it spread out and morphed into a strange, ancient-looking religious image, like something out of an ancient Eastern religion. He said it maybe looked Buddhist. He can't really describe it any better than that. So fast forward a few days, his mum had still been seeing the lights and the laser-like image continually. So he messages me and asks to sit with him in the shadows outside of his house and watch his mum's house. Her bedroom is facing his yard. We sat up there for about an hour or so, and we were actively watching her house for anything whatsoever, lights, movement, the like. We see nothing, and she texts him saying that all the lights are shining in her window, when we saw nothing at all. So we take off to her backyard and walk behind her shed where the lawnmowers are to get a better look. And on the way to the shed, he spins around and says, "Man, do you smell that? It smelled like something was burning, like burning leaves mixed with sulfur." We looked around the shed towards the main part of the yard and lawn, and a street light at the house right next door to them, so we had a good view of her lawn from this angle. We sat there, and there was a haze and fog on her yard only. We thought that maybe someone had been burning something, but thought it was strange since it was only on her yard. We spoke about this for literally about 10 seconds behind this shed, and he says, "Hey, the smell is gone." I realized that he was right, and we looked around the corner of the shed and the fog was completely gone. This would not have gone in 10 seconds. Well, about a week later, his mum is getting fed up with the nightly light show, and instead of looking out her bedroom window like usual and finding nothing, she starts looking out other windows. She gets to her living room and notices that at my house, keep in mind, I'm caddy corner across the road from her, that there's a fog behind my house. She said it was in the woods behind my house, and there are woods like 30 feet or so behind it, and extended just into the yard. She said it was dimly backlit as well, not brightly, but noticeably. Here's where things get strange. She says that at this point, 5 or 6 strange translucent figures come out the fog into my yard, right outside my bedroom, and into the field between mine and my neighbor's house. She said they were very human-shaped, roughly, but strange-looking, and didn't give many details about their features because she couldn't see the features very well from where she was. They looked almost like a hologram. I'm not sure what she meant by that. She couldn't fully describe their appearance, just that they came out of the haze and into the field and then glided over the ground without stepping. She said they kept getting in a group and bending over and squatting down and doing something like that. She didn't know what they were doing, but it made her think of digging. So they glide across the field, across the road and through her yard, past our house towards the barn into the woods. She said that every time she saw them pass by her house, the lights would happen on her ceiling in her room. She said that made this strange journey back and forth a total of 5 times that night, one time after another. That's basically it. I don't know what to make of it. I hope maybe some of you can shed some light on this inexplicable phenomena. This is an experience I had on a sleepover with 3 other girls of my sophomore year of high school. It was my friend Tina's birthday. I wasn't that close to her, but she was friends with my best friend Hannah, so we all knew each other. I had never been to her house before. I really didn't want to go to this girl's birthday party, but Hannah wanted me to go with her. Hannah also knew one of Tina's friends, Audrey, who was going to the party as well. A girl, Pam, was there, but none of us really knew her. So far, this had been a normal sleepover, despite Tina being a little off as usual. This wasn't weird though, since she's always an odd, compulsive liar type girl. We were all watching Hercules. Her parents had gone to bed, and they had put out a fold couch in the living room, and down the hall there were 2 queen-sized beds in a guest room for all of us to share. Tina's room and her parents were on the opposite end of the house. Tina decided she didn't want to sleep with us anymore, so she went to her own room. Pam went to the guest room to text her boyfriend and go to bed. Audrey, Hannah and I laid on the fold couch together to talk. We had our backs to the hallway and we were facing the sliding glass door into the backyard. We kind of started to see things move outside and we started getting creeped out. We talked about going to the guest room, but we didn't want to bother Pam. We got this sickening feeling that we were being watched from the hallway. When we looked, nothing was in the hallway, but in the picture frames we could see the shadow of a man walking back and forth down the hallway. I decided I should check on Pam. I got off the couch and ran down the hallway to see she was asleep. When I turned around to tell Hannah and Audrey, a chill ran through my body and I fell down. Hannah screamed and told me not to move. They both ran over to me and we went into the guest room and slammed the door. Audrey and Hannah got on the daybed against the wall and I got into bed with Pat, who woke up asking what was going on. I was having a full-on freak out inside, not knowing what to think of anything that had just happened. The beds we were on had been pushed together. The closet was open and full of empty hangers, and I could hear the hangers moving, but I refused to look away from my feet, paralyzed in fear. All of a sudden, a giant, glowing white mass grabbed Hannah's palm and I by our feet and tried to pull us off the bed. Pam and I jumped over to Hannah and Audrey's bed. Then, the bed Pam and I were on flew to the other side of the room. I tried to rationalize it, saying it was a cat or something, but Tina didn't have any pets, so we all sat against the back of the daybed, scared. Pam had goosebumps all over her body. I couldn't even bring myself to speak. Audrey was trying to ignore it, and Hannah was trying to control the situation. Then the bed started bouncing. It felt like something was pushing us from under the bed. It was a violent bounce too. Then it stopped and Hannah started looking behind me. When she pushed me forward, then screamed. We all asked what happened. Then she said she saw something reach for me, pushed me, then it scratched her. She lifted up the back of her shirt to show 3 long scratches down her entire back. The bed bouncing continued, lights flickered, and things in the closet began moving. At 3 we decided to sit out in the living room, grab our courage and ran out the room onto the couch. We all saw the figure of a man still walking in the hallway, and called up our families to pick us up as soon as possible. No one answered, so we left messages. So we creeped out the house and went into the backyard and sat on the trampoline waiting until someone woke us up or we got picked up. When we saw the security bar fall and the door lock, we got up and tried to open it, but not only was the bar down, but the lock had been locked on the door. So we waited. Her mum woke up and got us and didn't ask us why we were outside or how the door was locked or anything. We all left as soon as we could, but before Hannah and I tried to figure out why everything happened, but we couldn't debunk anything. I never went back to Tina's house, ever, after that night. I have what I would call a guardian spirit. I've spoken to other people who've had experiences, and while they've had something similar, it's not been to the degree that I'm living with. When I was 14, I was experiencing a lot of depression and anxiety due to family issues and drama. I was emotionally unstable and isolating myself from everyone. During this time, I believed something malicious attached itself to me. I began hearing something scratching at night. I could feel it touch me at night and would see a bulky figure as well. During this time, another entity made itself known. It would whisper my name, comfort me, and awake me from nightmares. There was also one night I fell asleep crying and woke up in the middle of the night, holding my hands up in the air. I squeezed and felt substance, and when I looked to see who it was, it let go and my hand dropped. There was nothing. One night I felt it grab my shoulders and shake me awake. "Sissy, wake up." I woke up to the malicious spirit sitting on my chest smothering me. I had to physically push it off, and afterwards it stood at the foot of my bed watching me. And I felt the guardian sit down next to me on the bed as the aggressive one dissipated. Eventually, the malicious spirit was gotten rid of, and the other one became very possessive over me. I haven't had many experiences with other spirits since I accepted its presence. I would often hear my name or sissy when I was alone or upset. At the very least, it's good to know there's someone watching out for me. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I hope all of you have enjoyed the video, and please be sure to leave me some feedback. You know what to do. As always, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to my wonderful patrons for their continued help and support. If you would like to help and support the channel, you can find the link to Patreon in the description where you can learn more, if you are so inclined. As I mentioned before, I am on the hunt for poop stories, so if you have any that you would like to share, make sure you write them fairly long, 500 words I'd say, and paragraphing is important, along with details of the horrifying encounter. And with that being said, I think it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.